I'm Ryan Stevens.
Dr. Taylor Waters.
I'm Ben Oliver.
Welcome to the Superhuman Show, yeah?
What's up, guys? Welcome to the Superhuman Show. I am your host, Ben Oliver, joined with Ryan Stevens and Dr. Taylor Waters. So, today we are going to talk about the grey area, and we don't mean Wales. We mean we talk about this a lot with our clients and on our kind of group calls in Superhuman about not living in black and white, in yes or no and absolutes, and starting to kind of shift perspectives to a continuum, like a spectrum of things, as opposed to you are either this or you are that. You're either doing this or you're doing that. And they're typically opposites, and one is perceived as very good and one is perceived as very bad. So some examples of this could be clean foods. You know, only eat good foods. You can't eat quote unquote bad foods or junk foods. With your overall plan, you're either on plan or you're off plan. You either hit your targets or you don't hit your targets. You either
Tracking or not tracking.
Yeah, you either track or you don't track. You either train hard enough or you don't train hard enough. And this puts an enormous amount of pressure on people to try and do the thing which is deemed as the good version. And the moment that they miss it, they turn a molehill into a mountain of like, now I'm a failure and I'm not that thing anymore. Yeah. So yeah, go ahead, Taylor.
The impact it has on motivation, it has such a negative effect, because it's like when you're doing things well, the motivation is going up. And then as soon as you hit that like fail and you perceive, so you've made all this effort and then you have one failure and motivation crumples back down. And it's such an erratic impact. So you spend all those weeks building the motivation up by executing good behaviors, getting good positive feedback from results, and your motivation to continue engaging goes up and up and up and up. And then just because you fall short of that really high standard, you go down, and then the motivation crumples back down. And then some people, they drop off, they don't get back on plan for several weeks, and then they're up another 5 pounds. And it's just such a, you see it where people, they go really well and then they go back down, and then they go really well and then they go back down, and their progress, again, they just end up spinning their wheels time and time again. But it's just because of the mindset that they take is so black or white, so pass or fail. They don't build any consistency with what they're doing. And as you know, consistency is the name of the game.
Yeah. And I love what Taylor said there is like, where if someone can't be perfect and they've set that standard what perfect is, they're going to do nothing at all, right? And then when they set themselves up for fail in terms of like a certain situation, which if they've set a standard that they can't reach in a certain scenario, what they'll often do, they've set themselves up to fail, but then what do? They then go even harder on the other end. So the extremes get even worse. And like a typical example I'll always see is like, okay, someone goes off plan on the weekend because their current plan wasn't feasible for them. What do? They then go on a water fast for 5 days. Do you know what I mean? So the extremes get worse and worse.
Yeah.
And often then that just screws up their habits.
It's a massive yo-yo effect. But it ties, like the word that you both mentioned was perfect, like perfectionism. And I think there's like it's misdefined with a lot of people, where people will call themselves a perfectionist and they're really not. What they're really saying is, I like things to go my way, and if they don't go my way, then I go wah, and then I throw my toys out the pram, and they'll say, "Well, I'm a perfectionist," and you're not. You're a procrastinator.
You're a baby.
You're a child. But no, like you procrastinate, and it's like when things aren't as easy or the way you want, you use that as an excuse to not do the thing. Whereas true perfectionists will constantly be working to improve. So if something isn't ideal, they are analyzing it and saying, well, how can I make it better next time? And then they're actively doing it. Whereas
they will get as close to perfect as they can, regardless of the environment that they're in,
continually as well. Versus you'll get a lot of people that will say, I'm very type A. I'm very type A personality. Like I'm a perfectionist. And as soon as I hear that, I'm like, red flag. And it's like, okay, so you're telling me you're a professional procrastinator, and the moment you don't get the way that you want things to go, you're weak. And like if someone says that I'm a perfectionist, because you know, true perfectionists are very, very rare, and they're typically hyper successful.
Yeah.
So when most people say they're a perfectionist, I straight away think you have no resilience. You know, you're probably very fragile in a lot of situations. Whereas if I see someone that they're never really 100%, but they can do 90% forever. And they're typically like, if you had like excellent, very good, good, satisfactory, poor, they're very good 95% of the time. They may get one excellent now and again. They may get a good now and again, but their average is very good, versus these quote unquote perfectionists get excellent 2 or 3 times and then poor.
Yeah.
And then so if you look at the average, it's like satisfactory or good.
Yeah.
And so it's like the net result over time, which I think is the most important thing.
Do you know what we always say, Ben? It's like optimize when you can, adapt when you can't. When someone claims they're like a perfectionist, it's like, okay, you can optimize when it suits you, but your ability to adapt when shit doesn't go your way is very poor. Yeah. And often in life, you're going to be adapting because things often don't go your way.
Yeah.
You know?
You see it in like in kids' sports and things growing up, where you think like the perfectionist is the kid that's always winning, but then he loses and he throws his toys out the pram and he storms off crying, and then he doesn't want to go the next week just in case he might lose. And it's like, well, that's not the perfectionist. That's just someone who's quite talented.
Yeah.
Whereas like it's the kid who is always trying to win the next match, is always trying to win the next round, and it's like he might not win the rounds because there's some things that are out of his control, but he'll always get up and he'll try and win the next one, try and win the next one. And that's the mentality you want when it comes to, you know, body composition, when it comes to, you know, long-term fat loss or whatever. It's that winning the next one, not just, oh, well, when I've got the perfect environment around me and I'm executing to a T, I love it. But then as soon as there's some barriers in my way, oh, well, it's not perfect, so I'm just going to crumble. It's something that you see a lot as well, and it backfires all the time. Whereas like, you've got to master the gray area. Don't just be black and white.
I think, because I've thought about this a lot with I am statements, positive or negative. So typically people always say, you know, never say I am and then a negative trait. Like it maybe you would say, let's just say a negative trait is that perfectionism,
lazy
or lazy. Yeah. You know, you never say I am lazy. You could say I have a habit of being lazy sometimes, because habits can change. You know, you're not that thing. You have a tendency to do that thing. And then people will say, well, then say, you know, if you say I am strong, you know, I'm a winner, I'm a champion, it's that positive reinforcement, and you are those things. However, because I've thought about this as well, if there's no evidence that you are those things, then you're not. You're delusional. But I do think you do need some delusion out the gate when you don't have any evidence.
Delusion can be useful.
Yeah,
it can be useful too.
But it's still delusion. Like that's literally the definition. There is no evidence for the thing which you believe that you are. And so if someone goes, you know, I'm a winner, and your track record is you know 0 and 50, it's like, well, in your mind you might be, but the evidence suggests otherwise. And so because we talk about this a lot, where like words are to me the lowest form of evidence, and then actions, but then the strongest one is patterns. Like, what do you repeatedly do? Because anyone can do the good thing once, anyone can really fuck up once, but when you stack up all of those things over time, you're literally looking at a ratio of how many times did you do the desired thing, how many times did you do the undesired thing. And then that's where, when you have those moments, like let's just say you go, I'm a winner, and you lose, and you get knocked out, you can go, well, I'm 49 and 1. Like evidence suggests I'm still a pretty good winner, but I just, you know, I lost this one time. And so you start to lean on the evidence a bit more.
What's that Kanye West song that John always posts? Is like, do it once, they think it's luck. Do it twice, and then you got to hit them with the repeat or something like that. That's literally what. That's
I mean, I don't listen to rap.
That song's new income.
Yeah, it's new income.
It's his number one.
But it
came out in 1997.
But it just goes to show, it's like you got to repeatedly do the thing to stack evidence to say, okay, the majority of the time I am who I say I am. You know, it's literally, you got to repeatedly do it. What you reinforce becomes ritual, right? It's like, well, I may have like lost this one 49 and 1, but I've won 49 times, I've lost once. So I'm more of a champion than I'm not a champion.
Yeah. Because that's exactly how I define, like, when people talk about like their values, you know, if they say like, I'm honest, I'm trustworthy, all these things, immediately I go, well, you're not 100% of those things because no one is.
No.
Whereas if you said, I'm more trustworthy than untrustworthy, like by quite a large margin, then I go, fair. Like I would say that's the most honest thing that you could say. Yeah. Whereas when people say, no, I'm very, very honest, it's like a lot of times it's like, no, you speak without thinking. That's not honesty. That's stupidity. Yeah. But also like, no one's truly honest.
No.
We are, our default is to lie. And then we have to tell ourselves, no, say the truth.
Yeah.
And so it's like, Jordan Peterson talks about it a lot, where it's like, no one tells the truth all the time. No. Like literally no one. And if someone says they do, then they are the biggest liar.
They are lying there.
So it's like all of these things, it's like we're saying, it's, you're not this or that. It's how much of this thing are you? And the goal is to stack as much evidence towards that thing as you can to reinforce it.
Otherwise, again, it just such like in the context that we're talking about now from a fitness perspective, and there is that like perfectionist mentality that's in, I would say, sport and fitness, and even you look at combat sports, for example. You'll see boxers go 43 wins. They lose one. Tyson Fury the other day.
And then
Tyson Fury's washed. I'm like, mate, he just lost to the one guy who's won all of his fights as well. Yeah. And he won all these amateur fights. He won the Olympic gold medal. He's got all the heavy belts. He lost to him by split decision, the closest decision you can get. People are like, yeah, he's washed.
He's done.
And I'm like, hold on a second. It's like we have this, and it's the same in fitness. Like, the influencers and the people online, everyone is posting all the things they do well. So when you look at your fitness person that you like to follow, or whatever, and you scroll through their Instagram, which is the only thing you know of their life, you look at, they don't put a foot wrong. They're on it. They're training all the time. Their diet is dialed in. So it creates this sort of image that that's what you need to be in order to be fit or in order to be healthy. And it just isn't the case at all. Like I sent one of my guys the other day my food diary. I gave him the link to my food diary, and I was like, hey, you've got like 5 months worth of data there. I said, flick through and have a bash on there. And he was because I was like, look, at most of the time I am spot on. Yeah. But I was like, you will see major flaws every now and again. And he went, oh, that 5 guys look good you had a couple of weeks ago, whatever he said. Yeah. And I was like, that's me living in, it's me trying to master the gray. I was like, that was me, most of the time I'm dialed in, but then there's some of the time where it was the best I could with the cards I've been dealt, and it didn't deter me from executing well consistently over time.
I've gone off my plan every single week for this entire cut, but that's factored into when I built my plan in the first place, because like I know that something is going to come up. I'm going to have a hungry evening or something, and it's built into my target. So if I do go over a couple of times, I'm still so far below where I need to go that not that it doesn't matter, but it's like I've got enough evidence of myself in the past that it's like, I'm not perfect with my diets. So I'm going to factor that into account when I build my diet. So even if I have a 70% week, I'm still getting good results. And if I do nail it 100, then I get great results.
That's you mastering the gray. Like you found a way that allows you to master that gray area. Whereas like if you were just trying to be bang on all the time, you would see those as off plan or when you see them as negative, as failures. And that would just beat you down and down and down again. And it's like, that's going to do nothing for your long-term success at all. But what you've done is you found a way to master that gray, which, and again, like, look, you've technically, if you were black or white, you failed every week of this diet.
The whole diet was a fail.
You failed. Every single attempt you've had to get back on, you've come back off. But then if we look, you're significantly leaner than you were a week ago, 2 weeks ago, 4 weeks ago, 8 weeks ago. So it's like, is that pass or fail? Like you need to zoom out. Otherwise, like you're too close to the forest, you can't see the trees. People look, they go so close. Like one of my guys was saying to me this week, and he was like, I had a nightmare this week. And I looked, and he actually had a nightmare. He
had a Kit Kat.
He's gone, that's a dream. He'd gone over calories by a couple of hundred because he had a couple of glasses of scotch. And then I was like, mate, zoom out a little bit. I was
Yeah.
like, your training's been superb. You're down 1.5 pounds. 6 out of 7 days you were completely dialed in. Over the past 4 months, you've dropped 20 pounds. I'm like, in what way have you had a nightmare?
Yeah.
It's because he was really beating himself up about it. And I was like, and this is, again, it's that black and white where as soon as he left the pass, he had failed.
Yeah.
And I think there is no pass and failure. I speak about it with nutrition markers that we set. I'm like, these markers, say now I set you at 2,500 calories. It's no pass or fail. That is a rough guideline to see if we can progress when you are hitting those targets.
Yep.
Some days you might hit them, some days you might not. It's like and sometimes you might hit them and you might not progress either. But it's data for us to make an informed decision of how we can actually get you progressing. It's not like, 2,499 is a pass and 2,501 is a fail. And that's because, again, people, they do that. So they've done a great job and they've misinterpreted that because of this black and white mentality. And it's resulted in a negative outcome, which is then them downward spiraling off their plan.
I think we're so big on the education component of like the principles behind of why we do the things. Because like training, people I couldn't get my chest workout in today because the bench was being used and I did 8 reps instead of 10. So I failed my workout. Whereas if you understood the principles and the goals of that session, where the goal is to do 10 sets of chest with movements that you can tolerate and train fairly hard, it's very hard to fail then because you've got a lot more flexibility.
Yeah.
Same with steps where we would say, we do want a daily target or a daily minimum to get that habit of moving every day. But if one day it's 9,500 instead of 10,000, and then on the weekend you do 12, it averages out.
Yeah.
And you understand it's like, well, the goal is to get the average of 10,000 across the week. And when you give yourself that flux, some days you're not hungry. Well, I'm going to pull back on my calories a little bit today because I know I'm probably going to be a bit more hungry on Thursday or Friday, or I'm going out to dinner, so I'm going to shift things. And so you start to practice being in that gray area and like you said, zooming out on the big picture. Because we were talking about this even in terms of relationships, and we were saying most good relationships, long-term relationships, you're probably going to bicker and argue 30% of the time, maybe more.
Well, we give him relationship advice.
No, but this is just a really good example. So 20 to 30% of the time you're bickering. If you're with someone for 20 years, you're bickering for 6 years of that relationship. And that's a good one.
Yeah.
So like, whereas when you're in, say, like a rough patch for 3 months, 6 months, a year, it can feel like, when is this going to end? You zoom out at the 20-year mark and it's like, overall, you've had a fantastic relationship. And it's exactly the same with nutrition and training, where you might have 6 months where you get injured, maybe you've had to change jobs or work circumstances change and you get a bit out of shape or whatever, and you have to get back into shape and then you get out of shape again. Obviously, our goal is to continually raise that baseline standard, but you're still going to go up and down. But then you zoom out in your entire training career of 10 years, 20 years, 30 years. It's like you were in shape for 28 out of 30 of those years. Yeah. And then in some 6-month blocks, you got out of shape because you fucking broke your leg.
Yeah.
And so the further you zoom out, you realize how not big of a deal the thing is.
Yeah.
I think a lot of people, they can focus on in the moment. Like a really common example that I see with clients is like, let's say when they first start, they may drop like 3 pounds the first week, 3 pounds the second week, and then the third week they maintain. It's like, I had a shit week. And it's like, hang on, over the last 3 weeks, you've dropped 6 pounds.
Yeah.
But they're just focusing on in that moment. And in that moment, it's like, I had a bad week. It's like, no, hang on a minute. Let's zoom out a little bit. You've had a fantastic week. You've dropped 6 pounds in 3 weeks,
And that the negative consequence that has moving forward on people, you see it time and time again where they have that one not perfect moment, and then that not perfect moment just downward spirals then. And it's just, it's such a bad approach. And sometimes it leads to this is the extent it can go from. They've had a couple of extra chips of an evening. That's taken them over their calories. That led to them not checking in because they were ashamed that they had a couple of extra chips. Yeah. That then the engagement drops off. 4 months later, they're up 20 pounds. Yeah. And it's like all because of that one thing that you perceived to be a failure, when actually if you just took 2 steps back, you actually lost 2 pounds that week.
Yeah.
Like you lost 2 pounds. You actually had a stormer, but for you being so tunnel vision and just on that one point, you're now up 20 pounds.
Yeah. I think a lot of people as well, they need to know that you can still be good enough and have areas for improvement. And this is where it comes down to not being on or off and understand that it operates on a continuum. So like, even if you don't do what you would have liked to do, like in Taylor's example, like not have those extra chips, like you've still dropped 3 pounds.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So it's like you were still good enough. And yeah, you got areas for improvement, but you still met the standard to progress.
Yeah. And that's like Jose the other week spoke about the stages of fat loss and kind of that initial stage when you're at 30% body fat, and you really don't need to do that much to change. And so I feel like that's a really good introduction into like a gray area where we don't take those guys and go no junk food, hit specific macros, same meals every day. It's let's start thinking about getting some more protein in. Let's try incorporating some more fruit and veg into your diet. Let's cut back the drinks at the weekend from 6 to 3. So we're teaching them that it's you can still enjoy yourself. You can still have drinks. You can still eat nice food. We're just starting to shift it a little bit. And then obviously the further you get dialed in, the less wiggle room you get. But at that point, we hope that you've built that skill of stepping out of that all or nothing. And then you can choose where to kind of put like how much effort you do want to put into it, but you've already understood that you don't have to abstain from something forever. You don't have to get your workouts in on the exact days that they're set and do the exact sets and reps to get results. You don't have to plan your meals to perfection every single day. Like you can fuck up a lot and still get great results, provided that the speed at which you get back on track improves and the magnitude at which you fuck up gets lower. So like I might mess up 3 or 4 times a week by 50 calories. Technically, I'm still going off plan, but the net overage is 200 calories.
Yeah.
Versus someone could go, well, I only go off plan once a week. And I'm like, yeah, but when you do, you go off the deep end and you eat 4,000 calories of cheesecake.
Yeah.
The magnitude is significantly higher.
They're way too extreme.
And this is where the how much goes into it, because it's a numbers game. And so, because you get it all the time where, like you were saying, you have a client and they're like, oh, I really messed up my week. It's so bad. And I'm like, what did you do? And they're like, I had an apple and I went over my numbers. And you're like, dude, no big deal. And then you got another guy and they're like, yeah, I went off a little bit this week, but no biggie. And it's like, you had 18 pints. And it's like, we're living in a different planet. So it's like people's idea of what off is completely skewed. And so that's why we're gonna look at the numbers of like, well, how much further did we go? Like, how much under or how much over are we?
Yeah.
Not a case of like, how do you feel you did?
Yeah.
Because that, that's, it's another can of worms.
Yeah, those feelings are, although they're only subjective, isn't it? It's just a subjective interpretation of what's happened. It's that negative or positive that it has after, and that's where I have some clients and they do really well right out the block.
Yeah.
And sometimes I'm like, this is amazing because their buy-in is so high. They're seeing all this great progress and they're loving it. But I'm always a little bit like, I hope that when they do fuck this up, they're not going to go, oh no, and just hit the panic button and it just all crumbles down.
Yeah.
So it's like, I try and, when they do make even small mistakes, I highlight them.
Yeah.
So it's like, so then they start to realize I am making mistakes and I'm still making great progress.
Yeah.
So I can make mistakes. Whereas not just like, you're perfect, you're perfect, you're perfect. And as soon as they get it wrong, boom, they drop down.
And it's setting that expectation, because I do it the same when we onboard coaches. I will say, you will fuck up. You will drop the ball on something. And it will happen. We've all done it. We all will probably do it again in the future. So when it does happen, don't freak out. Like, we're going to look at what happened, make sure it doesn't happen again in the future and learn from it. Like, all good. So then, because if I don't say that and then they mess up, it's like, oh my God, am I going to get fired? Like, what have I done? And all of these things. It's like, no, like you are going to mess up because you're human. just like our clients will mess up their plans and you mess up your own plans, like you will mess up your job as well. Like
Yeah.
we're all human.
Yeah.
And
We
so,
all
but
fuck up
again,
all the time.
our goal is going to be to limit the magnitude at which you fuck up and increase the like solving the problem as fast as possible if you do mess up.
Yeah.
And so over time, you'll get really, really good at, if you do slip up, you can solve that issue in 30 seconds.
Yeah.
It's like, cool, all good. Whereas initially, you probably had a panic attack being like, what's going to happen? But it's like anything is, if you have that expectation that it's not going to go well all the time, then when it doesn't, you're not shocked by it and turn it into a mountain and freak out.
Yeah.
Like making mistakes is part of the process, isn't it? And I think if you set that expectation where it's like, I'm winning or learning, but the most important thing is that you actually learn from it, because then those mistakes, they become far and few between. And then when they do happen, you know what to do. We're going to reflect on it. And how can we be 1% better next time?
But it's like the only way you get better is by making the mistakes.
Yeah.
Like that is literally the only way. Because I was talking to my my brother when because he was in between jobs and having to do interviews and stuff. And he's like, how did you get so good at interview? And I said, very, very simple. I said, I did a shitload of them and I fucked them all up. And so eventually I did it enough that I knew what to say because I had made every mistake that you could make. So now I kind of got the blueprint to not mess it up.
Yeah.
And it's like, I could write a really good resume based on, and it sounds like common sense, but a lot of people don't do it. Like you look at the job description and you change your resume based on the job description to highlight keywords and things that they're looking for.
Yeah.
Like, whereas people would just go, I'm just going to throw out my resume to everyone. And it's like, well, you haven't highlighted the key areas that they're looking for, just like basic stuff like that. Because I've done it so many times. And then I'll literally look at the job description. And I'll be like, fuck it, I'm just going to like copy and paste that and tweak it a little bit immediately, interview. And it's like, But just
it's this learning from those mistakes that is the important part. It's like they speak about this in aviation, so like with airports and things, and the disasters that happen. But where in that sector they're very good at recording data and learning from it. And if you look, like because again, when there is a mistake made in aviation, it can be an absolute disaster. Like you can kill hundreds of people at one time. It's chaos. But it's what they have done is they learn every time there's a major mistake, they record everything to the T and they make the correction. And then they've made another mistake. They record everything. And if you look at aviation now, from what it was, the safety of aviation now is phenomenal. Like it's such a safe thing to do now, which when it first happened, when people first started taking off in planes, it was like, might see you there, might see you now, might not. It's an absolute nightmare. But it's like, and that's what this is we go out. Luckily, if you make a mistake and you have a couple of extra carrots, it's not going to end up an absolute shambles unless you choke on them. But it's like, and then, okay, when you collect the data, you learn. You collect the data, you learn. And even us now, with my training, with my diet, I still make mistakes. I still make mistakes, whether it's increasing my volume too much, whether it's pulling back a little bit too fast, whether it's not listening to my body and cranking it when I don't need to crank it and not pulling back. All these things, I still make these mistakes now, and I've made them in this fat loss phase, all of them. But I acknowledge them much faster now than I used to. Because I've made the mistakes before. And then you can acknowledge, I've done this before and this was the outcome, so now I need to make a different approach.
And sometimes as well, you have to make the mistake over and over and over again to learn from it. Like me and injuries, like knowing when to pull back with training. It's probably only been this year, like perfect example, like last week I squatted and I deadlifted. Deadlifts felt good. There was one rep that just felt like on my back. And then the next couple of days, it just didn't feel as good as it did. And so on my leg session on Tuesday, I didn't squat. And normally I'd be like, tighten the belt. Like, warm up 5 minutes more.
Brace.
And then, take a deep breath and hope that it doesn't go. And I was like, you know what? Like, we're 2.5 weeks out from a photo shoot. This, if I tweak my back now, I will be so annoyed at myself. Not worth it. It's taken me 5 herniated discs to learn that. And I will probably still do it again in the future.
Not quite as good as the aviation. But,
So, like, you might make the same mistake over and over again, and then you try a different way and that doesn't work, and then you try again and that doesn't work. But the whole point is to just keep going until you find the right thing. But again, it goes back to that black and white, where it's just understanding the whole goal of this stuff is to just shift, like stack the cards in your favor or shift the ratio to the desired behavior.
Yeah.
And accepting the fact that you will never 100% be anything.
Yeah.
Because there will always be times where you don't do that thing.
Yeah.
And like, because I think as well, when people sign up to a program like ours or any other kind of like weight loss, not that we're a weight loss program, but like they do a program for fat loss or muscle building, whatever. I feel like some people feel like they think it's going to cure them from wanting to eat bad foods, and they no longer crave cheesecake.
If I were to solve that problem, correct.
And it's like, you know, they're not going to crave anything anymore, or whatever. And then, you know, they get a year in and they're like, why do I still want to eat cheesecake on Fridays? And I'm like, everyone does. Like, and in which case, if you don't like cheesecake, you're going to hell.
Yeah.
But it's like you're always going to have those cravings, but it's just your ability to manage them and accept. It's like, I accept that I will always be a foodie, and I will always would rather have the pizza than not have the pizza. But I've practiced enough to not have the pizza when it's not conducive to the outcome that I want.
Yeah.
And sometimes I will, and I go, I shouldn't have done that.
Yeah.
But the cards are more in my favor. That if someone said, can you control your calorie intake? I would say 9 times out of 10 I can. Doesn't mean always, like without fail. I said most of the time I'm pretty damn good with my training, my diet, my steps. But that 10%, I fuck it up. But if you accept that, it relieves the pressure of having to be perfect all the time. And I thought you did, especially being a coach.
Yeah.
You know, it's like, because you are an example to your clients, but also I think a good example to show is you can still get epic results, you know, and achieve all of those goals and not be perfect. Versus, you know, again, putting it on an unachievable pedestal where people feel like they're never going to get there unless they're perfect every day for the rest of their lives.
Yeah, and like, you know, when you said there, Ben, it was like, God, because I have a lot of clients to say like, oh, I'm always hungry or whatever, and there's almost like they expect not to be hungry.
Yeah.
And then I'll always say, well, yeah, you will be hungry sometimes, but the longer you deal with it, like, you just get better at handling being hungry.
Yeah.
You know, and that's what it is. It's like those feelings will be there and they'll never go away, but you'll get better at dealing with them.
Yeah. It doesn't matter how much, like, of everything we know about structuring a fat loss plan, high volume foods, you know, timing, like, you know, getting our meal frequency as well as we want, output, stuff like that. We still get ravenously hungry.
Yeah.
And there's nothing you can do about it, but you can just tolerate it better than when you first started out.
Yeah.
Like, you know, the moment someone gets that like grovel in their stomach, they're like, oh my God, I'm starving. Whereas now I could have that all day. And I just go, I've learned to understand what that feeling is and what it means, and that I'm not going to die. And I can just still follow my plan anyway. You just get really good at that. But the actual feeling doesn't change.
Yeah.
But when I get really lean, I find I'm hungry all the time, really. Even when I have a big meal, my stomach is full.
Yeah.
But there's an element of me that's still
Your brain is still
hungry.
telling you
I still
go eat.
I still feel like I want to eat more.
Yep.
So it's like, and you just learn to be, okay, well, that's in order to present the level of leanness that I have at the moment, that is just something that I'm going to have to get used to for the time being.
And also, if you like have a brand new client, okay, that hasn't been exposed to that hunger in the beginning, like they're almost going to think, oh my God, this is like an emergency. I need to sort it out straight away. Kind of like, imagine a heart surgeon, newly qualified, doing his first surgery. He'd be like, 100 surgeries in. He's just like, another day in the office.
Yeah.
You know, and it's kind of like the same with hunger. Obviously, you've been exposed to it so many times. It's like, now it doesn't even phase you.
Now I'm confident that
How many times do you get that with clients when they're like, I feel like my calories are too low, I'm really hungry, I think my metabolism's slowing down, I think I need to stoke it with a refeed and stuff. It's like, that's your brain trying to reason with you to eat more food because you're in a calorie deficit.
Yeah.
And because you haven't experienced this before, you're starting to panic a little bit.
Yeah.
Whereas when you've done it as many times as we have, you know the difference. Like, I know when my body needs to eat up, and that's generally done more by fatigue and performance as opposed to hunger. I would say, like, because I'll know the difference because I'll be craving like rice or something, and it's like I just want a big bowl of chicken and rice.
Or you'll get like
I'll go hypo when I do my
Yeah,
cardio,
yeah.
or like even with a pre-workout or something, I'm flagging, at the start of my session, and then I'm going to go. It's going to be more conducive if I get some extra carbs in to fuel my performance for the next few days than if I just try to tough it out.
Yeah.
But it's not really even hunger because I'm always hungry.
Yeah.
So that's a poor indicator of when I need to like refeed or eat more carbs, whatever you want to call it. But then if I see that like my performance tanks or I get gassed twice as fast, my sleep goes to shit, big drops on the scale that are like too much, then I'm going to say, okay, I'm probably going to throw some of that stuff in. But when you're first starting out, like the first diet I did, the moment I kind of felt that hunger, I was like, I need a cheat meal. It's like you need to stop being a fat fuck.
Yeah.
And then you realize it's like, oh, I got epic results when I stopped having my cheat days. And it's like, who would have thought?
Yeah. Mate, we were saying this the other day when we were on our hike, is this fat loss phase, and we've been doing this, like how many fat loss phases have we done? We've done shite.
I mean, I must be close to the 20s.
Yeah.
Now. Of like legit fat loss phases.
Oh, but if you're looking at half-assed attempts,
Yeah.
a couple hundred.
In the 40s.
But then and I said, this has been the easiest it's been to get as lean as I am. So in order to get this level of body fat, it's been the easiest run for me. Like there's been challenges, but it's been easier than all the other times because I've learned from all the other times.
Yep.
And now I'm just better at it again. And I'm sure my next fat loss phase will be easier again. And the next fat loss phase, it'll still be hard. It'll still be challenging, but it will be easier than this time round. And it was easier than the last time round. It's just, you learn more, you get more skilled, you still make mistakes.
Even in this one, I've learned like a few different things where, like I've learned at the start of a fat loss phase, I can handle 1,700 calories a day just fine. And I'm not hungry and I can train and I can do absolutely everything. When I start getting closer to 10%, is like an arbitrary number, but like kind of like close to how lean I am now, I can't handle less than, 2,000, 2,100 calories, but I can do more output. So for me, eating more and doing more is more effective than not doing steps, but eating 1,500 calories because just the way I like to eat, it's just not practical. Whereas for some guys, they would rather eat 1,300 calories a day and not do 15,000 steps or not do cardio. Whereas I like cardio, I enjoy it.
Yeah.
And so for me, higher calorie intake, higher output works really well. But also, because I've played around with this during this diet as well, is like playing around with my protein intake, where I've taken it like low, which I would say like 140, 150 grams, and eating more carbs and fats. And then I've taken it as high as 300. And I found that when I go below like 220, my appetite goes through the roof. And I'm just craving carbs all day. And so for me, from an adherence standpoint, I'm way better off going way more protein than I need. And then still getting in enough carbs that I can train, but that's it. And it's like, I will load up on egg whites, yogurt, chicken, steak, like lean steak, as opposed to, I'm going to get 150 grams of protein and I'm going to maximize my carb intake because my fat intake's fairly low as well. It's like I eat and then within 10 minutes, I'm fucking starving again. Whereas if I've just loaded up on, 300-400 grams of chicken, I'm good for a few hours then. Like that's filled up my stomach good. So, but again, that's like stuff that I've kind of played around with in the past, whereas I'm still refining now. Yeah. Even on the, and it changes like, so now I know the next time I do a fat loss phase based on my start point, where I need to set these things. Cause if I'm 30 pounds out of shape, I can probably go real aggressive and be just fine. As I start to get leaner, I have to eat more food. I just can't sustain it. Yeah. Like my fatigue level just goes through the roof. Yeah.
It's like you only gain that knowledge with experience, right? Don't you? And it's just like what you say, it's like this fat loss phase is like the most efficient it's been. Like you said, with like interviewing coaches, it's like, how'd you get better? I've done shitloads of them now. You know, and it's like, so the more fat loss phases you do, the better you're going to be at doing fat loss, because you're going to be able to refine your strategy, you know? And how do you do that? You keep doing it. Like we're 20 in.
Keep doing it. Keep fucking up.
And but as well, it's like, it's been on paper, it's been one of the most aggressive diets I've ever done. Like in terms of output's been the highest, steps have been the highest. It makes me laugh because like people will say like, "Oh my god, you drop weight so fast." It's like you didn't see the work that I'm doing every day.
You're
Like,
so lucky.
It's like it's aggressive.
I can tell you aren't fucking lucky.
But yeah, but it's like because I've given myself the flexibility of it, where if for some days I do want to eat less protein, I will. If I want to eat more, I will. If I want more calories at the weekend, I'll have them. If I want to do double cardio one day, like 60 minutes instead of 2 30-minute sessions, because of maybe I got calls in the afternoon, I will. And so it's like I've got my baseline blueprint of like, here are all of the like objectives or goals that I need to hit by the end of the week. Have at it. You give a new client that, they don't have the skill set to manipulate
you have to be an
it.
experienced with a skill set to be able to execute that well.
But now it's almost like you got your weekly calories, your weekly steps, your weekly cardio output. Go have fun.
Yeah.
And I can, some days I'm like, I know I'm going to be really hungry today, so I will load up on protein. And then at the weekend, my protein intake's much lower because I'm out doing something. The food's going to be slightly different. My meal frequency is down, so naturally my protein goes down a little bit. But I'm not thinking about food as much, so I'm just not as hungry. Whereas in the week, it's very regimented. And so it's like I work next door to my kitchen. And so it's very easy to just, potter in and out and like stop fucking thinking about food and go back to work.
Yeah.
Whereas when you're out, it's just not on your mind.
And this is where we'll always say, like, develop the skills first, and the flexibility will come after. Like you can work on like an average calories for the week, but let's say if you give like a brand new client with no skills yet, you say, right, your total calories for the week is 14,000. Go for it. Like
they'll eat 8 on Monday.
Yeah, they eat it on Monday. Whereas like with you because you got the experience and the knowledge, you'd be like, okay, 14,000 for the week. That's okay for you because you understand. Like, I'll have 2,000 a day or 3,000 a day, and they'll balance it out. You know, so like skills will always precede flexibility.
The more skills you get, the more comfortable. The more skills and the more experience you get, the more comfortable you are in that gray area. It doesn't need to be black or white to feel comfortable. You can you build that, you just have that comfort consistently because you're so familiar with the experiences that you've been through that you know that you've started to learn that it's not good or bad. It's not pass or fail.
Yeah.
It's just, okay, this is just a continuous process that I continue to maneuver through. And as long as I'm moving in the right direction, then I know I'm doing the right thing.
And so I think like even with this, because we spoke about like I am statements and stuff, even where I've just mentioned that I really struggle going below 2,000 calories on the back end of a diet, I still don't say to myself, I can't diet on less than 2,000 calories. It's like, well, you can, but I could say the evidence has shown that I have a tendency for my adherence to drop when I go below 2,000. I'm not saying my body doesn't respond to less than 2,000 calories or I can't do this. It's like, no, I've looked at all the data, and every time I do this thing, there tends to be a rebound effect. So I tend to avoid it. Completely different language there, where it's like, oh, I have to eat X amount of protein. I have to have my, Snickers bar every day, or I can't stick to my plan. I have to do this, or I must do that. It's so weak. It's like, you don't have to do anything. You're using that as a crutch. Like I have a tendency to have a really strong coffee in the morning and work. If coffee didn't exist anymore, I'd go, oh, that's a bit shit. And then I crack on with my day. I don't go, I can't do my morning routine. I can't function now. But again, it's that gray area. And like you said, it's adapt. Like I want to be as resilient and as adaptive as possible for any situation. So I want to be able to handle a diet that's lower on protein or higher on protein or lower on fat or lower on carbs. I want to be able to handle doing aerobic work during the week and still recovering from weights and even getting all that stuff in whilst I have a busy work day. I want to be able to do this stuff when I travel. None of it's going to be perfect, but I want to have a pretty good skill set to handle all of it in any situation. Because over the long run, when I zoom out 30 years, that's going to net me far more positive results than, I had a 3-year stint where I lived like a monk and, weighed everything to the ground, was meticulous. And so, but then for the next 7 years, you're Big John, and just
Big John's
back down the pub. So it's like, I'm looking at like, well, how do I build the skill set to be really good, not perfect, but really good at this stuff in any situation for the rest of my life?
The vast majority
and
of the time,
that's kind of how we coach our clients. And there's, like you said, there's points where there are more restrictions because you're learning a skill set and you're building the foundation skills. And then you go into that flexible stage and we say, well, this is going to be the most sustainable approach for the rest of your life to be able to manipulate this stuff in any situation. And like we were saying at the start, live in the gray area. And you know, you just disregard, it's shades of gray. There's no black or white at this point.
Yeah. I think when you was talking about like being perfect or being able to adapt, I think, and like I am statements, a lot of people, what they'll do is like, if you say I am lazy or something, right? It's almost like you put in the responsibility on an external factor. Like, let's use perfectionism. Oh, unless this happens, I can't do this, right? Whereas if you say, like you said, tendencies, in this situation, I have a tendency to do X, Y, Z.
Yep.
It gives you the power that you can change it if you want. So then you can reflect on it and be like, right, well, I can adapt in this situation by being better next time. But if you think that is out of your control, then you can't get better of it because you believe it's out of your control.
My only gripe with saying positive things like, oh, I'm a winner, or I'm this, like we're saying, you know, some delusion is good and it can be a benefit. But what I see as well with a lot of those people, when the opposite happens, they have an identity crisis because they've attached themselves to this thing which they view as positive for so long. You know, it could be someone that's like, you know, I'm extremely loyal, and then it comes out that they've been having an affair for like 5 years, and it's like, now everyone knows that you're not that thing. Now you're like, well, who am I?
Yeah.
Like, because you've attached yourself to, like, whether it's a brand of your company and it's like, you know, loyalty or over everything or whatever it is, like, now there's evidence that you're not that thing. You then have a mental breakdown because you're no longer it. And so if you view it as a continuum, then you avoid that identity crisis, I think, where you can say, okay, like, I'm more of this thing than I'm not, but I'm not absolutely that thing. Because if you identify in absolutes, something will happen that will be contradictory evidence, and you will start to question your whole identity, and then that's when you can get depressed and really struggle with, like, what the fuck do I do?
In any field, absolutes are not great. Like, again, we're talking about the black and white mentality, but it's that, again, it's the all or nothing. It's the I'm either fully loyal or I'm not loyal at all. It's either, you know, it's either I'm not religious or I'm an extremist. It's like I'm either sedentary or I'm trying to run the ultra marathons. It's like it's always anything taken to the extreme is usually gonna backfire somewhat.
And it's because there is, you know, like David Goggins, it's very extreme, and it's appealing to us to look at and stuff. Whereas if you go, you know what I am, like the sexiest thing I've ever heard, I'm a moderate man. You know, everything I do, moderation.
Yeah, half-assed.
Yeah. If you're ready for an extremely moderate life.
Yeah. You want to have a good time?
Not a great time,
no,
but a good time consistently.
Hey, you want to have a decent time tonight?
But that's it. But what's really ironic is, in the long run, that is what people want.
You want to have a decent time this year?
Yeah. you can have an amazing time this year, and then a dog shit year afterwards when you get fucked over.
Yeah.
Or you can have a very, very good time forever.
Yeah.
And then most people go, I'll have the excellent time.
I'll have a blast for the year, and then a shambles for the rest.
But it is that, like, it's not as appealing. Like the extremes are very appealing.
Extreme
like
sell, isn't it?
75 hard, water fasting, you know, juice cleanse, all this stuff. It's all extreme, and it's quick results, and that's what's appealing. Whereas, you know, if you say to someone, you know, we're just going to moderately change your lifestyle forever, it's that doesn't appeal to me.
No,
but that's exactly what I know that needs to be done for long lasting results. But yeah, so I mean, really, the summary of this one is, if you catch yourself with that all or nothing mentality, or you're beating yourself up because you slipped up, or, you know, you're struggling with things that you identify as, but then there's evidence to suggest that you're not, start living in that gray area and stop saying you either are or aren't, or you absolutely should or shouldn't, and start looking at how much of this thing are you? How often do you do this thing? You know, what's the ratio between doing the behavior which you deem positive to get the results or the traits or whatever it is you're after versus the ones that aren't. And that really just the overall goal in your life is to stack those cards in your favor. But it's never going to be perfect. Awesome. Well, be sure to subscribe to us on Apple, iTunes, Spotify. Give us a 5-star rating. If you haven't got anything nice, don't say it at all. And we will catch you next time.
If you love this show, please like, share, and leave us a 5-star review so that we can help more people. I'm John Matson, Superhuman CEO, reminding you to always go get what's yours.